What's going on YouTube? It's Teach, back again with another video. And today I'm giving out my way too early position rankings, talking about the 2024 NFL tight end draft class. So excited to talk about this group, and obviously there's a couple of names at the top that I think everybody knows about, but I'm excited to talk about some of the other names that might be in the mix for those mid to late round conversations and some potential sleepers. So I'm gonna give you my top 5 as well as 5 honorable mentions, but I'd love to hear your list down below in the comment section. Who do you have ranking 1 through 5, and who are maybe some of the names I didn't include that you think I'm crazy for not talking about in today's video? And hey, maybe you're putting them on my radar and I'll go check the tape and see what they're all about. So let me hear your thoughts down below in the comment section. Like if you enjoy, subscribe if you're new to the channel, want more draft content. But let's waste no further time and let's jump into it, talking about my number 5 tight end, Brevin Spanford. Yeah, he's kind of a unique one to start off with, and he's a very different tight end than who comes in at number 4. So that in and of itself is kind of an interesting place to start. So Brevin Spanford, tight end from Minnesota, is 6'7", 270 pounds, and right off the jump, that's a different type of beast right there. And he's probably, from my estimation, the best blocking tight end that we have in this class. There are a few, and then we'll talk about one in the honorable mentions, but I think Spanford goes above and beyond, above everyone else there. 82.5 PFF run blocking grade last year to kind of put a tangible number to that. And then off of that, 2.22 yards per route run. It was actually top 4 in the country. So he's this interesting blend of being a really awesome blocker and enough of a receiver. He's got soft hands and a massive body. So where between the hashes, boxing out linebackers, positioning himself against safeties, the guy's awesome. Getting over to the negatives. He's not a special athlete, as you might expect for 6'7", 270. That's just, you're going to be few and far between for special athletes there. And because of that, the route running, the separation isn't jumping off the page, doesn't jump off the film where it's like, this guy's just running away from everybody. No, that's not necessarily his strength. And he won't be a downfield threat. Like if he's running a seam route, if you're not getting the ball out to him pretty quick, you missed your window of opportunity. Like, this is not a guy that's going to threaten 15, 20 plus yards down the field unless there's a coverage bust or something like that. But you're getting a super special blocker of a tight end and a good enough receiver underneath in the intermediate parts of the field in between the hashes. So he's a very specialized guy, but there are plenty of offenses where you're not asking a whole lot of your tight end, and to basically get a 6th offensive tackle and enough middle of the field receiving ability, that's plenty. So I do think he's going to end up being this kind of 3rd, maybe even 4th round type of prospect. And who knows, maybe he goes in above and beyond, showcases more receiving ability, and he moves the narrative a little bit more in his direction and maybe gets himself in that 2nd round conversation. So then on the other side of the spectrum is Jaheim Bell, Florida State tight end at 6'3", 232. Not the smallest tight end we're going to talk about, believe it or not, today, but he is on the lighter side, and he's actually got snaps played at running back. And he legitimately, when the ball in his hands, looks like a legitimate running back threat, and kind of on that 2nd power 5 and yards after catch behind one other tight end, the guy we're going to talk about, number 1, Brock Bowers. So it's kind of like the wide receiver episode where you're going to hear me list off a couple stats where these guys are like 2nd 2, and it's like the freak show at number 1 that is beating everybody. But yeah, Jaheim Bell as a yards after the catch, uber athletic, the new age tight end. And the reason I kind of say that is I think that's kind of where the position's heading. One, you'd like to have these guys play in line, but we're seeing more and more often where if you can play power slot, or maybe we can position you and get mismatches out wide, we're going to take advantage of that. But also just the, usage of cover 4 and those 2 high shells where, Kansas City Chiefs, that offense is a perfect example. They went from this big play, they could go 80 yards at any given moment, to one of the more efficient yak-based offenses in the league last year and got him a Super Bowl out of it. And it was, taking advantage of what Kelsey can do with the ball in his hands and, getting the ball out quick to a Kadarius Toney, a Sky Moore, a Juju Smith-Schuster is also a good yak weapon. Mecole Hardman, that's kind of the name of his game. So changing that offensive philosophy, I think that's also going to trickle down through the rest of the league. And in turn, these tight ends are going to go from like, hey, you may not be 6'6", 260, kind of those prototypical builds, but if you're special with the ball in your hands, we already have to kind of adjust and change to being a yak-based offense, and you fit that. And that's where I think Jaheim Bell is going to be a valued target for some team in the 2nd to 3rd round range. Is kind of where I think he's going to end up being. Obviously, we're in the way too early stages, so plenty of room for me to be wrong. But I'm seeing him as a dynamic, pseudo wide receiver, pseudo tight end, but yak machine. And if there's a team that's specifically struggling to beat those 2 high shells, this is your kind of counter to that. Bring those, bring that extra defender down in the box, force you to cover the middle of the field, and then who knows, maybe those sideline throws and other big plays kind of open themselves up by forcing the defense to respect what you can do underneath, or you just pick it 8 to 10 yards up at a time, because once you get the ball into the Jaheim Bell's hands, guy's really, really special after the catch wise. And I'd like to see Florida State actually tap into that skill set. I felt like he was really, really underutilized last year by the Seminoles. So then at number 3, Bryson Nesbitt, probably a little higher on him than most. I'll start by, it's hard not to account for the production I think he's going to have in the back of my mind and what that's going to do to skew the scouting community and what teams look at him as. But, Antoine Green's gone. Josh Downs is gone at UNC. We're a Bryson Nesbitt away from Drake May having a very similar situation as Sam Howell his last year at UNC, where it's him and no one else NFL caliber-wise around him, and he's just kind of left fending for himself week in and week out. And, Drake May's not too far off from that, but Bryson Nesbitt I actually think is a really nice vertical-based tight end, really good seam route runner. Like, I almost think if, the Packers didn't draft 2 tight ends in the 3rd round this year, this is their guy, like a souped-up, uber-athletic version of Robert Tonyan. Give him that same exact route tree and just watch him feast. But kind of on that note, 6th in the country last year in depth of target at almost 12 yards, so that's really, really impressive for a tight end. And again, he's going to get all the workload at UNC offense, so I think his numbers are going to be through the roof. Like, I could see him going toe-to-toe with Brock Bowers and Sanders at the top of this ranking in regards to receptions and yards and touchdowns, just because he's going to be the lifeline of that offense. And then one more small tangent I want to go on. Like, I compare that to Michael Mayer last year at Notre Dame, where there's not a whole lot of receiver talent. Michael Mayer is the focal point of that offense, but he's not a dynamic enough athlete to kind of shoulder that load. He's got his own strengths and he wins in different ways. I think Nesbitt has more athleticism to actually be able to, live up to that. I'm not saying he's better than Michael Mayer, but I think his athleticism, if that's going to be your one guy that you win with as a pass catcher on the outside, I think Nesbitt's actually a little bit more catered to play some slot, play some outside like Notre Dame tried to do with Michael Mayer some last year, just because they absolutely had to. But on that note, really good athlete, really solid player after the catch as well. Getting over the negatives, 6'5", 230, probably needs to bulk up a little bit. I think he's an okay route runner and an okay separator, but nothing that really wows me, and I think that's definitely an area where he can improve. And I want to see more of that contested catch stuff. It feels like you're kind of playing with sliders here, where it's like, oh, he's an uber good athlete, so he's good after the catch, but kind of leaves something to be desired as a contested catch guy, and that feels a little true here for Nesbitt, and I'd like to see that narrative change a little bit going into this season. If we start to see him come down with a 50% contested catch percentage, then I'm feeling really, really good about Nesbitt as a round 2 tight end. All right, let's get on to the top 2, and I don't think that's going to shock anybody. Jatavion Sanders is, I feel like kind of everybody's darling is that tight end 2 of this class. 6'4", 249, and I'll say it off top. Whenever I do my updated mock, actually, it's not going to be whenever, we're going to do offensive line, the next ranking, tackles and interior offensive line together, and then I'm going to put out another 2024 mock draft. And don't be surprised if Sanders is in the 1st round. I really do like Sanders. He is this absolute freak show athlete at 6'4", almost 250 pounds, prototypical, built in a lab to play tight end. 32 catches for a 1st down or a touchdown last year, 4th in the country for a tight end, trailing Brock Bowers, Michael Mayer, and Dalton Kincaid. He was in that pedigree as a 1st round tight end in last year's draft, an early 2nd round tight end, and Brock Bowers, who I am assuming is going to go somewhere in the top 12 to 15 picks of the NFL draft. The only reason he goes that low is because of the position. So, yeah, he's an absolute freak show, and there's really not much to his game that I don't like, right? I like the route running, I like the hands, I like the frame, I like his ability to work inside and out. I think he's a pretty solid player after the catch, too, because, again, God-level athleticism. He is just, unfortunately, for his sake, in a class with maybe the best tight end prospect I've ever seen and ever gotten to scout. So it almost kind of feels Jahmyr Gibbs to Bijan Robinson, where we're going to talk about Bowers, which we can kind of transition to that as my number 1 tight end. Not going to surprise anybody there. 6'4", 230. I mean, yeah, you could maybe add a little bit of weight, but Bowers otherwise is just kind of the complete prospect. And everything that Sanders does really, really well, Bowers just does it at a special, top tier, elite prospect level. So he kind of goes even further than what Sanders can do. And again, harkening back to the Bijan Gibbs comp, any other class, you're looking at Gibbs as man, that's a really awesome best running back in the class. He's got explosiveness, awesome pass catching ability, good frame. He's got everything you want. He's coming from Alabama, the great tradition they have with producing NFL backs. But Bijan Robinson exists, and he's kind of one of one in the country. And then prospect-wise, maybe the best since Adrian Peterson, maybe the best since Saquon Barkley. But even the fact there's a conversation about that speaks to how great he is. And that feels, again, kind of what we're getting at here in this tight end class, which is a good group. Bowers is kind of that one-of-one, all-time special prospect, the best tight end prospect I think I've ever scouted. And then Sanders isn't terribly far off, but, like, a really awesome tight end too. And that's why I think legitimately, I think these two guys in my next, early 2024 mock, they're going to both have to be in the first round. Bowers is a given because, whether it's his route running, it's his contested catch ability, it's his yards after the catch stuff. He's also a more than plus level blocker. And you look at his PFF grade last year at 74, or there just under. At 230 pounds. Like, he is that good of a blocker in the SEC, and I think he still probably needs to add 10, 15 pounds to be like a high-level NFL blocker. But he's still getting the job done because the effort and the technique's there. So, yeah, Bowers, not surprising anybody. He's a freak show. Anything you ask him to do, he can do it. Play inside, play out, play inline tight end. You name it, he's an all-around weapon. And then Ja'Tavion Sanders, not terribly far off. It's just what Sanders does really, really well, Bowers does at an absolutely exceptionally special level. So that's my 1 through 5. Let's go ahead and start talking about some of these honorable mentions. So I mentioned Brevin Spanford is the best blocker in this class. I don't think Cade Stover's terribly far off. 6'4", 255 pounds, so very prototypical size there. Really balanced guy. Like, Cade Stover and Brevin Spanford, because of their blocking, definitely feel like the safest picks, other than, Bowers, because, again, just an absolute, freak show of a player, and just such a, talented player, and maybe the best tight end prospect I've ever scouted, all that to repeat myself. But then you look at Cade Stover, and it's like, yeah, if you're eyeing Stover in the 3rd round, I don't think you're going to be disappointed, but I also don't know if he's going to go above and beyond that to be like, wow, he should have gone earlier. So, to me, right behind Spanford is the best blocker in this class. Really comfortable receiver, hard to bring down. The guy's an absolute tank. Just the only negative I have is I just don't see anything special about him, and that really sucks to say, especially as someone who's not 6'4", 255, and he wishes he was. Wish he could play at the NFL level, right? But he just lacks that specialness that some of the other guys have. Like, I think Nesbitt can be an awesome vertical-based tight end. I think Ja'Tavion Sanders can do just about everything you want and be a really, really solid day 1 starter. And then Brock Bowers is a stud. Cade Stover's just your safe play in, the mid to maybe even 4th round range, where it's like, hey, I know what I'm getting. It's not going to blow me out of the water, but I know it's going to get the job done. I can play him all 3 downs. Solid receiver, and kind of off that, maybe the other negative that might be around Stover is the production's probably not going to be all that gaudy. I mean, Ohio State has the 2 best receivers in the country by my estimation, if you go back and check out my wide receiver ranking. So odds are ball's going there to Marvin Harrison Jr. or Emeka Egbuka. So I don't know how much, the numbers, back up Stover as like a high-level receiver, but I think he's a really solid pass catcher over the middle of the field. And again, a tank to bring down. So he's your safe, prototypical mid-rounds type of tight end. Maybe he lingers in the 4th. And I think if you're a team, NFL, that, you already got winners on the outside, you're just looking for a replacement tight end and a guy who can play all 3 downs, this is your dude. Then we get to Jalen Conyers. And he's a fun one to talk about. Transfer from Oklahoma, now playing at Arizona State. 6'4", 265. And how about 21 forced missed tackles last year as a tight end? So he is kind of in that camp like a Jaheim Bell, where this guy, after the catch, if you are struggling against those 2 high shells, this is your counter. This is a guy where throw it 8 yards and watch the linebacker struggle to bring down this type of an athlete, and watch safeties get bowled over by 6'4", 265. Like, he is just a really special athlete given his size, assuming those measurements are correct. Who knows? Power 5 schools, colleges in general will inflate those numbers. But yeah, fantastic athlete for that frame. My negative for Conyers is he's only done it the 1 year at Arizona State. So if we see more of what we saw last year, yeah, I love the idea of him as like this 3rd round, uber athletic, yards after the catch mismatch weapon. But if he takes a step back, maybe he lingers into the day 3 conversation, we can kind of become a little sleeper prospect, or maybe he goes and doubles down on what he did last year and gets even better, right? Like, maybe the numbers get even more inflated. He plays that much better, and he just looks that much more developed. Then maybe we're talking about a 2nd round tight end. So Conyers got some variance here. He could go, round earlier than I'm thinking. He could go around later, maybe 2 rounds later than I'm thinking. But right now is this like athletic mismatch, yards after the catch, 3rd round tight end. I really like Conyers there. And then we get Brant Kuithe. And I mentioned earlier, Jaheim Bell, not the smallest tight end we're going to talk about. That's where Kuithe comes into play. 6'2", and on Utah's website listed at 220. And we'll have to start with the negatives because I just don't know how that plays at the NFL level. And I actually want to mention one other prospect that a lot of people are probably going to be looking at and like, hey, well, what'd you think about him? And that is first team All ACC tight end last year, Aranda Gadsden from Syracuse. He is bigger, but in the same kind of conversation where it's just like, I think Gadsden, I don't know if he's really a tight end, but I don't know if he's a wide receiver at the NFL level. So I'm really stuck between, a rock and a hard place when trying to evaluate what position group to put him in. So ultimately, I'm just going to opt out and kind of figure out what happens this year at Syracuse. Keithy on the other end of the spectrum is 220, and it's like, can this guy add weight? And can he play inline tight end? Or because of that size, is he just going to end up becoming a big body slot? Now, kind of leaving the negatives because, a lot of that's TBD. We'll see where it goes. This was the guy outproducing Dalton Kincaid at Utah and keeping Kincaid on the bench for the 2 years prior to last season when Kincaid breaks out. And really, that's only happens because Keithy only plays 4 games, has a season-ending injury, and Kincaid becomes the #1 receiver. But before that, Keithy was the guy outproducing. Really fluid athlete. I think a route runner that can win at all 3 levels as well. Solid after the catch. There's not a lot in his game that I have a problem with. I think he's actually a really solid prospect, really well-rounded. And I think he has the effort to be a good blocker, but kind of like Kincaid, it's just not there yet. But then Keithy is 220 pounds versus Kincaid at 250 plus. So it's going to come down to that weight. Is that a weight that he can actually play tight end at? Is he going to change positions? Can he bulk up? All things I'm really curious to see. But like I said earlier, colleges will tend to inflate, heights and weight. 6'2", 220 almost sounds like I'm talking about a wide receiver versus a tight end. So I'm just very curious to see where that goes. But the talent, and you watch the dude play, yeah, he's special. Then we get C.J. Dupree from Alabama. I'll speed it up here because these last 2 guys, I'm not over the moon about either one. And obviously, one's a massive projection. We'll see if he's even any good this year. But Dupree transferred from Maryland to Alabama, 6'5", 260. This is your Cameron Latu replacement if you're a Crimson Tide fan. Pretty fluid athlete, massive catch radius. That's kind of the thing I like the most. And I'm not saying he's Pat Freiermuth, but when I looked back at Pat Freiermuth at Penn State, it's like, dude, this guy in that 8 to 10 yard middle of the field between the hashes range is going to be a force. And I kind of see Dupree as the same thing. I think that's kind of going to be the role he plays for Alabama. And he's a really solid safety blanket option. Again, that kind of just fits the stereotype I think he falls under. He's an interesting route runner that he doesn't win with separation or quick twitch or agility or anything like that. It's just changing his gears. He'll start top speed, and then as he goes into a break, he'll lower it down to third. And it's not really a sharp break. It's just more so he's getting the defender running full speed, and then he throttles back, and therefore the defender's kind of lost a step of separation. And because of that big catch radius, and he's 6'5" and 260 pounds, once he gets that foot and the ball gets to him, you're not going to jar it loose to the vice grip that he has for hands. So again, kind of an old school tight end. I would be very curious to see where that route running goes this year. Can Alabama get that much more out of him? Obviously, a better program than Maryland. No disrespect to the Terrapins. But also a work in progress as a blocker. And that I feel more confident will come along because has the frame, has the strength. I think now he just needs some coaching, and he has the effort too. He puts forth the energy to be a good blocker. I just think Alabama's going to need to get their hands on him, let that coaching staff do their thing, and he'll become someone that we view as a plus level blocker, something that we see as a strength in his profile versus a weakness. I'm just hoping route running ends up being the same thing. And the last thing we talk about is Eric Gilbert, 6'5", 255, and I mean, if you've been around, the channel for a little bit, or you're in the draft community, or you're a big-time high school recruit follower as they go to college, you know who Eric Gilbert is, and just an absolute special talent. And I mean, that's kind of my #1 bullet point here. Is I don't think the talent's the problem. Has the athleticism, has the frame, has the hands. Got a former 5-star recruit for a reason. This guy had the billing to be for a future first-round pick. He really had that ability and that kind of foresight in his future. It's just availability, to steal a cliche, availability is a key ability here. And for Gilbert, this upcoming season, I think that is the most important ability he can put on display. Can he stay healthy the entire season? And can he carve out a big role in that Nebraska offense? And even just talking about Nebraska, this guy committed to LSU, transferred to Georgia, and is now playing at Nebraska. That's 3 different Power 5 schools, 2 coming from the SEC, and then the other in the Big Ten that are we want to figure him out. That's how good of a player he is. And that's why Nebraska is yeah, sure, reclamation project, but the upside is totally there. So I don't know, maybe he doesn't do anything this year at Nebraska and he ends up becoming a 6th, 7th round flyer for a team. Maybe. Because if colleges are trying to get the most out of Eric Gilbert, I don't think the NFL is going to pass on that either. Or he becomes probably the main focal point of that Nebraska offense, and we get to see that talent kind of fully utilized. And who knows where the ceiling takes us there? Like, he's such a tricky prospect where I don't even want to say like his upside's first round receiver, because there's still going to be the negative connotation of, yeah, well, it's his third team in as many years. He's played one full season, and there's just a lot more than just that 1 year production with the Nebraska Cornhuskers. So big TBD, but I had to mention him here because talent-wise, I mean, he's got the ability to be one of the best tight ends in this class, which is a good tight end class. It's just, are we going to see him play? And if we do, how big of a role is Nebraska going to trust him with? Again, I don't think talent's the problem. He's a true wild card this upcoming season. But I had to mention him here at number 10 as my last honorable mention. But guys, let me hear your early tight end rankings down below in the comments section. Who you got 1 through 5, and who are some of those honorable mentions? And definitely let me know if there's a name that you feel like I left off wrongly. I want to hear that name, and I'll go back, check the tape, and make sure I didn't miss them. Or I'll kind of give my explanation of where they would fall. Maybe they're tight end 11, maybe they're 12, maybe they're 13, something along those lines. But let me hear all your thoughts and hot takes down below in the comments section. That's going to do it for me. Hope you guys enjoyed. Hit that like button if you did, and subscribe if you're new to the channel and want to see more football and draft content like this. But that's going to be all for today. Until next time, my name is Teach, and I am signing off.